stay fly, stay fly.
So when you get into the biblical Exodus, the 42 confessions of mine are somewhere between 2,000 to 2,500 years older than the 10 Commandments. Than 42 negative confessions. They're technically the confessions of Ma'at. That's what they are. And sometimes it happens just from having fun, and you wind up getting caught up. And there you go with fantasy without self-discipline leads to self-destruction.
Stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly.
After all that party, the views expressed by the guests are only the views of the guests, unless we say we agree, unless explicitly stated.
Peace Code Keepers, yo, it's time for a great conversation. We're going to fall back a little bit into some knowledge of self. You know, we're all about empowerment, health, wealth, knowledge of self. So tonight is all about knowledge and self. And knowledge of self really can lead to our main focus of empowerment. So we have with us the Khemetian monk. I kept calling it the Tahitian monk and the Tibetan monk. And he's like, nah, bruh. You wrong, bruh. You wrong for that, bruh. So, man, I'm kind of excited. In the background, you see, are these the pyramids in Giza?
Yep.
So-called Giza. Mm-hmm. All right. So why do I have pyramids from Kemet or Egypt in the background? Why is that even connected to what we're discussing tonight? So I guess I'm leading to your origin story. You know, we can watch the Black Panther's origin story. We can watch Storm's origin story, Spider-Man's origin story. You can tell I like Marvel, right? Iron Man's origin story. Let's learn about your origin story. All right, so how did you get involved in all this Khemetian science and philosophy?
Okay, so when I was young, about, 8 or 9 years old, I had a middle brother. I had a baby brother who was like maybe 1, maybe 10 months old, something like that. And he, my 2-year-old brother was hit by a car when I was 2 years old. So when that happened, it just created a whole host of questions, because at the time I was of a belief that, I guess from a immature child point of view, that God wouldn't have allowed something like that. So I had a misunderstanding, I guess you might say, of natural order, or natural order would be the way to put it. So I just began to dig deep and try to find an answer for why that happened. Your 2-year-old brother's hit by a car, you drop on your knees and you pray to everything you know how you've been taught to pray to. You call on God, you call on Jesus, you call on the Holy Ghost, you pray with people, you hold hands, you go to the whole 9 yards. And it didn't seem to have any effect, so I needed to have an answer. That wasn't good enough for me at the time. So I began to seek a deep understanding as it relates to where did all of this stuff come from in the first place, and was it accurate? So that's pretty much how I got started.
Wow. And so what has that led you to?
Well, at a young age, I figured out the closest you're going to get to the truth is the origin. A lot of people think that, I can know this, I can study this and I can know this. I can take courses and I can understand it. But when you're dealing with ancient lore, I might say, when you're dealing with that type of what I call a type of technology, sensory technology that our ancestors had, that's not something you can just go study. There's certain attributes you're going to have to take on to be able to see it the way they saw it. And so that in and of itself, man, I'm no doubt took me well over 24, maybe 26 years just to get to that point. And it wasn't until I got to that point that I was able to glimpse into their understanding of what we are. And then I was able to, then from that I was able to get answers for a quest I had started, 40 years ago, So it took a long time. Of course, you have life too, life happens. You do this, you do things, you live your life, you make decisions, some of them right, some of them wrong. Every one of them have consequences you have to deal with. So obviously there's a lot of stop gaps along the way. But for some reason, I just never really drifted away from obtaining that answer. I just stayed with it.
So do you have a better understanding after studying Khemetian science of why your brother became an ancestor? Yeah,
I do. So
right.
it goes back to what our ancestors thought we were in the first place. Their depiction of the beginning is far different than say the way we see things today. Is far different. For example, their concept is that God divided itself into the many things which took form, and that formation of individualities called Asars, A-S-A-R-E-S, Asars, right? What we have to understand is what they understood. And trust me, even after I understood this division that they expressed or explained about how everything came to be, which they called nurture, is the instantaneous transmission, or should I say, transition, or how should I put it? Transcendence of one form into many. That's called nurture. They have a certain word for that, right? And within that are individualized wills. An individualized will is what you are, is what I am. And so once I got to understand that, then the perspective changed completely. I was like, well, wow, that's way different than anything I've ever heard of or that I'm learning in this day and time. So it became more intriguing. I wanted to learn more. And by doing that, obviously, that took time. Breaking down the theme of Asar and Aset, that story, the situation between Asar and his brother Set. There's about 3 or 4 primary metaphors that are nothing more than metaphors. And also, ditching the idea that these are gods, so to speak, when they're not. That is a great secret in and of itself. But when I discovered what that was, it changed my entire mentality. Then I began to be able to identify with what I am and what you are and what we are.
And what is that?
Well, if God divided itself into the many things which took form, according to them, right? Then what is it that divided? That's the question. What divided? Now, it still took me years to even figure that out. But what divided was will. The will was one, and the will became two. Or the will was one, and the will divided into many. And so what this does, addresses the idea that we have that still survived into this time, that God is all things. But nobody describes how that process came to be. Nobody seems to have an answer for that. It's just God is all things. Well, how did God get to be all things? So when you have the concept of a creator, right? Well, God is creating something. You get the concept of separation, created from creator. According to our ancestors, that's not what happened. The creator itself divided itself. So we are both the created, if you could, in the terms of what took form, and the creator at the same time.
So we're the creator and the created simultaneously.
Yep.
Kind of like a plant, where the plant has seeds.
That's correct.
And so it's creating the new generation,
right?
While it was part of an earlier planting.
That's
and I
correct.
see your shirt says Brooklyn Peace out to Brooklyn.
That's where my daughter Cameron is right now.
yeah. Brooklyn is a blood type.
Yeah.
All right, I'll leave it at that. You know, were you from Brooklyn, man?
Born in Jamaica, Queens, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Brooklyn keeps on taking it, and we're going to see that later on night when, actually, we're probably not going to see that tonight. You know, we got KRS-One versus Big Daddy Kane tonight on Versus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Classics.
That's going to be hot. But Brooklyn keeps on taking it. So how does that differ from what you learned growing up? Catholic, Christian?
Catholic, New York Catholic.
New York Catholic.
1960s, yeah, Catholic.
That's the Catholics who were changing names to make sure they were biblical names and saying you can't have that name. You got to have a Christian name. Those Catholics.
Well, I mean, yeah, those Catholics that used a concept of cleanliness from the ancient Egyptians called circumcision. The Egyptian priest, and after part of your initiation, after you went through the education, and then after you completed the what we call it, the 7 liberal arts, right? Once you complete the liberal arts, and then you enter into the priesthood, then if you were able to pass that, then you got circumcised. That's what made you clean. That's where circumcision come from. It's not a Christian concept whatsoever. It definitely has its roots in ancient Egypt. Oh, and also Ethiopia as well.
I say that. I remember when I was studying some of the Khemetian science, as you will, we saw the pictures where men who were going through the priesthood training were holding their genitals, making a promise. And they made a testimony, and they had to hold their testes, and they were saying, if I break my bond, if I lie, then may my ability to reproduce be taken away from me. So, and it was just kind of interesting watching those types of imagery from our ancient Khemetian ancestors. How does this vary from what we learned as Christians?
Oof.
And I'm going to preface your response by saying one of the things that my father was a minister. All right, he had his doctorate in theology from Livingston, and we used to sit and just kind of watch things. And one day, one of the popes had passed away, and they were having their funeral procession. But in that, they had the homily of the saints or something like that. Right. And I was like, Dad, they're doing libation.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, they are. And we can kind of imagined then how the Catholic Church was just a pretty version of African ritual.
Correct.
A very pretty version of African ritual. And then we can look at some of the royalty that's in the background currently in this picture, where we see people of royal stature, and they're wearing the hats or the headpieces that later became the headpieces in the Roman Catholic Church.
Especially the one that it appears to be that looks like Oscar's wearing, the one on the left, right under the G. That particular crown is very similar to the Catholic Church crown. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting that it's right under the G. Somebody caught that. I don't know if everybody caught that, but somebody caught that. It's right under the G.
Yep.
But go ahead and answer the question. How was what the Osiris or Asar-Set Haru story, how is that very different? And then how is it very similar to what we learned in the Christian doctrine?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll reverse it. I would prefer to reverse engineer that question. So I'll start with the similar yet different. Okay, so in Mott philosophy, one of the things that I became aware of is the similar yet different thing. So what that's really referring to is the variances in energy. It's all the same energy, but it's a variance in that energy. So the expression of that energy varies. So that's why you see things that will be similar yet different. That includes philosophies, concepts, ideologies. You see things which are similar yet different. So when you look at the Savior concept, when you get into, say, Jesus Christ in Christianity, the idea there is that that you're supposed to live a certain way, right? You're supposed to live with reverence for others, basically. You're supposed to do that. And the changes in your behavior in terms of how you live is what actually saves you. People would like to think, well, I know it's said a lot that as soon as you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, then you're saved from your former life or your past behavior, right? So I guess that's when you finally, achieve not repeating the past behavior. So with Heru, who's the similarity with say Jesus to Christ, Heru was the first savior in history. That was the very first one. That's the little guy there. He was the first savior in history. And what we have to understand, though, is that the difference between, say, the Hebrew concept or the Greek concept of Christianity, which is New Testament, Jesus, this kind of thing, the apostles, that's Greek. That's not Hebrew. That's not Jewish, right? Understanding the difference is that the whole concept of Asar, Aset, and Heru are metaphors. These are actually aspects of yourself. These are not beings or deities that existed in another form. These are actually you. Heru represents your own will. Aset represents your emotional behavior or emotional perception of things. And Asar represents your true being, your true self, that which divided from Ta from the very beginning. Right? When God divided itself into many things which took form, he called them Asars. And that's who that is. That's actually you. Now, I know Asar is personified in the photo there as being male, but in reality, in the Asar state, nothing is male nor female. These are states of energy. Will is energy. Asar's is your will of your higher self. That's how that works.
Whoa. The will of your higher self. Yes. All right, so okay. Prayerfully, we're going to understand all this because you dropped some gems. All right, so I just want everyone to pray that you're going to understand this. What is the higher self and lower self? Okay,
so that's what the two pyramids represented that you first put up in originally. So they say it's been, there's certain class of people stole this and calls it the Star of David. But in reality, its origin comes from the concept of the Star of Ra, right? So just to get the story straight, Ra is not a sun god. It just so happens that since Ra represents divine will, and divine will is enlightening, shining like a light, many assume that its association is that with the sun, but it is not. It's divine will. I express it to my own, friends, neighbors, family, as Ra is actually life. So the way we would translate that today is Ra is actually life. It's anything that has form, that has life, objectivity. That is Ra in and of itself, in its pure form. There's no form without Ra. That's simply how that part works. Hopefully I answered your question. I think I maybe pivoted a little bit too much.
That's intriguing. I also want to say that we have Cameron, Mayan, and Imani who might pop in with a question. So I'm looking forward to hearing what they ask their dad. And also, hey, the viewer can watch, the viewer can ask a question in the comments and we'll post that. So, we talked about some of the similarities with the Asarian Aset belief system. Well, I'm using that term Asar Aset because I studied with Asar Aset at one time.
Right.
When we look at the cross, and this is a Coptic cross, this is the cross that you find that the Ethiopians will use, and it actually originated in Kemet, or what we call Egypt. All right. Are there any symbols in this cross rather than the traditional Tau, the T-A-U,
right?
The letter T,
right,
that most Christians associate with the cross of Christianity?
Well, I would say it's an exaggerated version of the caduceus. So if you're familiar with the caduceus, like when you go to the doctor's office or you go to the dentist and you see the pole with the serpents going up, and on either side you see the wings. If you remove the serpents, you wind up with the pole going down the center and the wings on either side. That's what creates the cross that you're referring to. So I would say that it really more presents or represents the caduceus more than anything else as far as the cross goes. But what's been removed are the serpents that go up the caduceus sign, or that go up the cross, so to speak. So those serpents represent the forces of energy, your own life force, which rises up and down every time you inhale and exhale. That's all a part of your own being. So there is also a meditative practice that you can perform that deals with cultivating that a little bit better, helping your life force, I guess you might say, flow through your body. But the purpose for that, obviously, is for enlightenment. So but to be enlightened, you have to first find peace. So you have to calm yourself. Though that I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I will fear no evil. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou makest me to lie down beside the still waters. The still waters is emotion. So if your state of being is disrupted, overstressed, then you cannot be calm, and you cannot still the waters, and you cannot be at peace. And that distraction doesn't allow you to communicate with your ancestors and listen to whatever it is they have to tell you. But they're always there waiting all the time. Yeah, that's the caduceus there. Classic. That's the caduceus, yes. And the two serpents represent the two ladies in reality, which are the two aspects of mind. The one on the right is Aset. The one on the left is Nekhebet, or you can call her Het Haru. That's what the two serpents actually are.
So you're saying that the Tau, the T-A-U, the cross that is part of the Christian iconography is really kind of based on, was this older than the cross?
By far. Remove the serpents, and you have the cross right there. The wings represent the crossing bar. And even if you remove the wings and you remove the serpent, you can see there's a bar right there that the wings rest on. So it's right there.
Whoa.
It's the same thing. It's just what you have is, in my opinion, not only a copy of something, but you also have a misrepresentation in terms of what it actually means. But to the Hebrews in Judaism, it means the 10 Saphari. The cross breaks up into 10 squares. So you have two squares on the right and left that makes your crossbar, and then you have two squares, 1, 2, and the third with a 2 cross, and then you have the other going down. So you have 6 going down, and 2 on each side coming from the third square. Those are called the 10 Saphari. So if you've ever understood, what's his name? Oh my God. There's a way to read that moves counterclockwise around the various squares. the tables of. It escapes me right now what that part is, but I also am not too bad with the Kabbalah or the Khemetian and I guess you might say interpretations of our ancestors' work. I'm familiar with interpretations of our ancestors' work too. That was some of that's the stuff I had to trudge through to get to the actual gold. I had to go through all the gold concentrate. I had to go through all the ground, move all the rocks just to get to the gold. And on the way there, I ran across, the Khemetian, ran across the Kabbalah and all its meanings and the Zahar, the whole 9 yards. I went through that entire path just to get to the origin because I knew none of that was the origin.
All right, that's a lot. You're doing the most here, brother. That's a lot. The show Get On Code is all about empowerment, health, wealth, knowledge of self. So part of what the show focuses on is in the area of empowerment, finding things that empower us to solve and be able to truly master the challenges that face us. So with all that you've learned, how can what you've learned help this situation? These are the melanated who've been murdered by police officers.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still kind of, we as people of African descent and an Aboriginal descent and indigenous descent, whatever term you want to use, we've had a difficult time with the judicial system since the 1800s. And so, since the 1800s, every president, Democrat, Republican, whatever, has been turned a blind eye when we're saying, hey, we're having a very different experience with this judicial system,
Right. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So how can we empower ourselves, in voting, politics, attention, resource, economics, with the information that you've learned that deals with Asar and Aset and Haru? How does that make you a more empowered person when you're dealing with the problems of the world?
Well, the number one issue, I think, in terms of what you just expressed, is consistency. I think the number one issue is consistency. So, first of all, we're following philosophies of other groups of people. That's number one. So there are going to be perceptions, right, of what we've learned. And as a result, that creates inconsistency. When you're trying to establish a system should be something you can go to and have an expectation. You know what the outcome is going to be. If I do this, I can expect that. If I do that, I can expect this, right? In our own culture, we don't have that. We don't have a system of our own. So it's more like trial and error. And when we do something, we have to figure out, well, we'll do this, and we don't exactly know exactly what the outcome is going to be. Most times we know it's going to be unfavorable as it relates to an advantage for us. But the issue for me with that is that's got to do with the inconsistency. So when we practice inconsistencies, we're going to wind up having inconsistent behavior in terms of how we interact with each other. For example, I was born in the 60s, but I'm old enough to remember, the riots and when Martin Luther King was shot and, word on the street, what happened with Malcolm X and all that kind of stuff, right? And what stands out is that we never had a system of how we're going to interact with each other, right? So it's funny because I was talking to my daughter about this earlier. I was talking to Imani about it, and I said, we go about it the wrong way to deal with those type of situations that you just mentioned. we should be doing is we should be going for the throat of the judicial system like any other country does. You take it into the court system. You fight it collectively as a whole, not allowing it to be separated and dissected. Well, we'll do this one, then we 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 do this one. We have to attack laws that address what our needs are. We are taxpayers, are we not? If we're taxpayers, then we should be respected as such. And as a result, we should also demand what our needs are. We're not demanding that our needs are met. That's the issue. That's what I think the issue is. If we're going to address the situation with law enforcement, which is more locally, unfortunately, we're going to have to handle it on a national basis and then allow it to be broken down from that point. Because if we do it from the bottom of the pyramid, what winds up happening is we're working with one stone at a time. And because of time and over distance, these conditions seem very separated. We need to approach all these as one thing, opposed to this one thing in this corner, one thing in that corner, and we work everything one brick at a time. We just start with the one brick on top, build our legislation from that, build up what it is we want from that, and then we can address all those things. But the way we go about it, there's no system. And as a result, our own people, like I said, they don't know what to expect even from us. We don't even know what to expect from each other because we don't have a system in place that would support what our interests are. And this is how it works in America. People lobby, right? We've heard people lobbying for laws, lobbying for change. The people lobbying, I've never seen them march. They lobby to change, to influence changes in law. They don't march. So right. I think the way we go about it, and for some reason, we're not getting it. The way we've gone about it hasn't changed. And I don't know why we seem to think that we can keep using the same model, and that model's not working.
And I don't think we're actually looking at the entire model. So if we go back to the marches that began during what we call the civil rights movement,
right,
and those marches, and that was just part of the strategy. That was just part of this. So those who trained Dr. King shared with him that marches and demonstrations just brought press attention to the situation.
Yeah.
And behind the scenes, you have to do the negotiating and the dealing and the demands. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, that's what happened with voting. That's why, we're able to vote now because, we had the marches going on, but behind the scenes, the president at that time and those who were working with Dr. King, because, everyone wants to attribute everything to Dr. King.
Right.
But if you read Dr. King's books, he tells you who he was rocking with and the women that participated and helped kind of shape some of the ideas that happened and the men that were working with him and, things of that nature.
Right.
And, they shared it. This is how we had to approach things. We had to break things down this way. We had to say, if you want this, you're going to get this and those types of things. And so it's kind of interesting, like when you look at people who are impoverished, mm-hmm. if you ask them what a wealthy person looks like, they just tell you the clothes, the car, the things they can see, but they can't see what produces the wealth that allows them to purchase the cars, right. The clothes.
Yeah. And that's an easy one. That's interesting you would say it because that's an easy one. What produces the wealth is what they're standing on. It's called infrastructure. If you don't have infrastructure in place, then you don't have anything to build on. So you've got to have water, you've got to have electricity, you've got to have industry that supports an economy. So even though we may most times, reference what we see as wealth, we're not really understanding what wealth is. When you stop at that traffic light, that's wealth. When the lights come on, street lights come on at night, that's wealth. Wealth is all around you, right? The issue is, how are we using that? How are we applying that? What are we thinking about? Why do we have what are you doing with electrical current? Is that electrical current benefiting you in any way? Can it benefit you in a way? Can you use the light at night to write a book? But you'll always be just listening to music or watching TV. What are you doing with that power that's in your possession pretty much as long as you're breathing. What are you doing with it? We're just talking about electricity, Or are we? What do we have? We have NFTs now, right? I mean, you can draw something and sell it as a digital asset. What are you doing with that time?
Well, I think we're talking about electricity, but we're not just talking about. We're talking about the ashe as well.
Yeah,
we're talking about the ashe. We're talking about the ka.
Yeah.
And you can probably better talk about the ka and what that means. I'll say, ashe is like energy, your life energy. But I brought that up because when many of us look at what happened during the civil rights movement and how some of those things were brought to the plate, we see the march, we see the picket signs, but we don't see what really made things change. Let me give an example that I've become acquainted with recently. We know about Bloody Sunday. So we know about the people who were marching on the Edmund Pettus Bridge and how the police officers and started attacking them, and the white supremacists started attacking them, and the marches that happened after that didn't have the same level of violence upon the marches. Now, what most people believe that there was a change of heart, that the prayers were answered. And I'm not demeaning the power of prayer, because whenever you focus on something, you give your ashe, your energy to something, things can change. I metaphysically, physically, I get that. But what they don't talk about is the Deacons for the Defense of Justice, which was a Christian gun organization. And after what happened at Edmund Pettus Bridge, the civil rights organizers hired this gun club to protect the marches. So, yeah, we had people marching with, picket signs and singing "We Shall Overcome," but we also had brothers who were there with guns.
Yeah.
And they were like, act up if you want to, act up, you can get smacked up. That's what, and things became a little more civil. A little more, like these cats are not playing, they going for this. So I say that a lot of times we see the flashy stuff, but we don't see what it took for things to move.
Right.
So this kind of brings me back to, how do we make change? How does the Kemetic science help us to make change? You talked about a book, and actually I read this 20 years ago.
Yeah.
What are some of the messages in this type of literature that we can use to help make change? And secondarily, how is this related to this?
Ooh, well, you're trying to really get to it, huh?
Do it.
So first of all, the Khemetian is as you know, there was another book that came off of this that became very popular for a while, a series, a cassette series and CD series that was called, the laws, based on the laws of attraction and stuff like that. That was a spin-off of the Khemetian. Okay, so as for me, I know the entire tree inside and out. The Khemetian, as well as The Secret, only talks about various aspects of it as it can benefit you, say, financially, right? The Khemetian has more to do with benefiting one from an alchemic standpoint. So the three initiates and the people of that particular organization were focused on power. So the Khemetian, they believed, would enable them to be able to use or practice alchemy, right? Literally, I mean, you've got people who are still doing it, trying to figure out how to, convert iron into gold, for example. But it's not alchemy. They're using the wrong term. The term they should be using is transcendence. And so both the Khemetian and the concept of The Secret, or the Emerald Tablets, as it was called when it was discovered, that was written by they called the Greek terminology was Hermes Trismegistus, which means the thrice great, 3 times great. But that's really not his name. His name is I prefer to pronounce it as Tahuti, but some people pronounce it as Didgehuti, with a DJ rather than just T-E-H, Huti, U-T-I. Some pronounce it as DJ, E-H-U-T-I. This is supposed to be the aspect or the attribute of God in terms of all-knowing and wise, right? But really, when you get into the pharaohs, they always walked around with either with a crook in the right hand and a flail in the left hand, which had to do with the flail had to do with I'm sorry about that. I don't know who this is, but the flail had to do with self-discipline, and the crook has to do with wisdom of the ancestors. So their concept was never to disassociate with all the cosmic energy or all the different how should I say expressions of God. Because so when I get in these these conversations with people, I say you got to make up your mind: either God is all things or God isn't. Which is it? So if God is not all things, then it's okay for you to say you're not God. But if God is all things, then obviously, guess what? God is also you. So, but how does that work? What does that mean? So when you get into frequency and energy, matter takes on form, but something has to inspire that matter. So the form that we take on is obviously based on an image. That image comes from a photon, if you would, right? So it was believed by our ancestors that cosmic energy was directed by will, right? So when you get into that part of it, now what we're getting into is the tree of life, is what the Kabbalah was talking about. It's referring to the tree of life, and there's been many, I don't know, must be some 23 different renderings of what the tree of life looks like, right? But what it looks like is not relevant. How it works is, what does it do? And the truth is, all these are actually attributes of your own being. So I learned, I don't know, maybe 25, 30 years ago, that our ancestors' technology was us. It wasn't, it wasn't a cell phone. It wasn't a computer. It wasn't space technology. It was the technology of self, understanding what we are, how we operate, what makes us work. What is this? How are we able to derive heat? How can we create images in our mind where there's no light? How can you see an imagination? How can you have a dream? How can you see a memory? When there's no light in there, So they I guess you might say, question, reality itself. And so the question became, well, what am I in the first place? And how do I function? And so when you get into the car references your spirit energy in that way. But Ka, in and of itself, the KH in Ka references understanding. What is that? Well, understanding is of what? It's understanding of Ma, to interrelationships and interdependencies between things. But it's two things to that. It's how you feel about those interdependencies and interrelationships between things. And it's also what you can see in those independencies and interrelationships between things. You have to be able to feel it and see it to have understanding. If you don't you don't have full understanding.
Wait. You just went too deep.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so for the uninitiated, what is Ma'at? And what is Ka?
Okay.
You were saying it, but I guess for the uninitiated, they may not necessarily have a frame of reference.
Okay, so Ka, first of all, my definition of it or description of it may be different than, say, some spiritual organizations may have defined it, right? So my spiritual definition of the Ka is based on the sound of Ka, right? So Ka, I know for a fact, is based on its sound, is a divine tone, if you would, right? So as you know, Ba in Khemeric energy is known as your soul, right? And Ka is known as spirit. But these are your individualized spirits. But spirit in reality is energy, right? And anything that is energy is also will, right? So in order for us to experience existence, we have to be able to interact with the so-called laws of God, which were known as ma'at, right? So ma'at is the interrelationships and interdependencies between things. Now, we can live or have an existence in ma'at, which is where we are, which are, we live by principles and standards, I guess you might say, or universal rules that allows our form to coexist in this, what we call reality. We're living in ma'at, whether we realize it or not. The difference is how you're able to interact with it. Are you interacting with it, or are you not interacting with it? If you are, then that's called wisdom, because then you have an understanding as to how things work. But when you lack an understanding as to how things work, it doesn't mean you can't live within ma'at. It simply means that you don't have the ability to interact with it. And from what I've learned, that's really the ultimate goal of our ancestors, is to have that understanding, so that when one leaves this particular form, one will become a shep, which is supposed to be one of the highest, that's supposed to be like one of the highest things to be. Now, a shep in Christianity would be Jesus, as he's often referred as a shepherd. Shep, we were using those terms back then. Shep means shepherd. Shepherd of what? Shepherd, one who guides others. All right, but they were called sheps, and that's what the crook is that the pharaohs or the mummies would hold in the right hand. That's what the crook is. The crook represents a shep, being a shep, that is one who guides others.
And I learned that I guess, when they talked about in the Bible, particularly, I can't think what passage it is, but thy rod and staff, the rod was hard knowledge and staff was guidance.
Well, you can call the rod hard knowledge, but in reality, the rod is self-discipline. I tell people all the time, fantasy without discipline is self-destruction. So you have to have emotional self-discipline. So it's like if you're young and you're in a relationship with a young lady, you may have just gotten married, maybe you didn't, but you're living together and you guys just had a baby. And the oldest one of you might be 24. What's going to happen? It's going to be some people going to be getting upset, baby crying all the time, it's wearing on you, you're tired, you snap, you get angry, right?
I've lived that life.
and so this causes a lot of relationships to fall apart, because there is no self-discipline as it relates to emotion. If you lack emotional self-discipline, you're not going to be able to get along with anybody. You're just going to become an anger management issue. That breaks up so many families, So, taking the time to be still and to center yourself and relax everything, all your bones, just relax for a while and let things go. You can have it back tomorrow. Don't go to bed with stress. Don't go to bed with some issues. You can have it back in the morning when you get up. But tonight, before you go to bed, release all your fetters. Let it go. And, that's one thing that I learned from my ancestors. That was the hardest thing for me to learn. It blew my mind when I found that the Khemetians were, they're doing the 42 confessions of mind. Technically, there was a time frame between 9 p.m. and about 11 p.m., definitely before 12 a.m., they did their 42 confessions of mind to release, to be forgiven of all their fetters if they had any, or to at least make confessions as to how they lived that day. I have not wronged my neighbor. I have not stolen. These different things they would say. It's because they had a concept that judgment came every single night between 12 a.m. and no later than 3 a.m. So between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. every single night, judgment came. And then, of course, you had the big one, which occurred on the 8th day, which for us in our 7-day week, it would be on a Saturday. They had a 10-day week. So for them, it was on the 8th day. So, it blew my mind when every night these people were confessing that they had lived righteously every single night. We don't do that in this day and time. In fact, it's cool to live a debauched life and be anything other than the, I guess you might say, anything other than the rule you've been given to live by. But we are still expressing our own free will, and that is a good thing. But just be wary that sometimes free will can be disrupted with fantasy. And like I said, fantasy without emotional discipline is self-destruct. It can lead to self-destruction, and that's what happens to so many people. You get a little caught up, you get a little beat up, and you do the thing, you do the drug thing. Sometimes it happens just from having fun, and you wind up getting caught up, and there you go with fantasy without self-discipline leads to self-destruction. Yes, that's exactly right. What you put up there. 42 negative confessions. They're technically the confessions of Ma'at. That's what they are.
Right. And so I'm just kind of showing the viewer where they can find this information. So the 42 negative confessions of Ma'at. And intriguingly to me is some of these are what we call the 10 Commandments.
That's correct. I think that's what I said. I figured you were going there. That's exactly the 10 Commandments were extrapolated from that. That which you just showed a second ago is anywhere between 2,000 to 2,500 years older than Exodus. So when you get into biblical Exodus, the 42 confessions of Ma'at are somewhere between 2,000 to 2,500 years older than the 10 Commandments.
Another thing that I learned as when we looked at the 10 Commandments, one of the things my father taught me. Now, I shared with you that my father had his doctorate in theology. He shared with me some things that he said he couldn't really share with the congregants, and one of which was there were more commandments than the 10 Commandments.
Yes,
that the 10 Commandments are a condensed version. And that when we looked at, the burning bush, whenever you saw something burning, it was enlightenment. It was new knowledge. It was new guidance. So, yeah.
That's why pyramids, pyramid represents fire. So the Per Imharu, which is what the pyramids are, the pyramids represent fire. Now, fire in reality represents inspiration. So even though you've got Moses with the burning bush, obviously the burning bush inspired him to do what? To write the 10 Commandments. So fire is actually inspiration. And if you notice among the ancient Egyptian lore, you'll find aspects of that fire all the time. You see the sun disk above the scarab with the wings on it. You see the pyramids, pyra, fire. That refers to fire. So all this has to do with enlightenment. We could call it fire, but it's really inspiration, and inspiration is actually enlightenment.
All right. Well, why don't we take a few moments and allow your children to ask any questions? That would be a setup for me, because my children would go at me.
Mine probably will too. That's fine.
Like, Dad, you talk all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, hey, Cameron, Mayan, Imani, any thoughts or questions that you want to add into this conversation that Pops has dropped so far?
Sure. I'm Cameron speaking. I'm actually glad that you're talking about this. This is we've had this conversation a lot, Daddy, around just Will and Mott. And I guess my question is maybe one that could have been mentioned also is when it relates to, let me think. Kind of forgot my question, but when it relates to just in imagination and in passion and things like that, how do you create that through when you're meditating to manifest things, putting your energy into things? Why don't you talk about that more? Because I know that was a big thing that you talked about for me.
Right. Okay, so what she's referring to is things that you can do in the meditative state. Obviously, once you realize what you are, then understanding the process. So the process starts with concept. Concept is another word for conception, but this is all in the conscious state, right? The way you apply your will to a dream or idea or concept or ideology that you have in your head, if you're going to manifest it, it's going to be based on how you feel about it. That's one. Number two, you have to be patient. Some things which are small, or should I say, it has an interrelationship that's short on a short vibrant level, so to speak. Those things will manifest sooner, but some things have to calibrate over time. They have to line up over time, and when they line up, then those things can happen. So it depends on what it is, but always how you feel about it is actually feeding it. So the manifestation is coming from you. Now, just so you understand, I'm not trying to make it sound like that ultimately it's not God. Of course it's God, but one aspect of that is also you. So as you could say, it's both you and God that's manifesting something that you have an idea about it, but how you feel about that idea or concept or ideology, that is going to determine whether or not you get to realize it. So as you know, when you were younger, I always talked about life is only two E's, right? Expression and experience. These are the only two states. These are the only two states we're ever in. We're in the state of experiencing someone else's expression, or someone else is in a state of we're in a state of expression to someone else, and they're experiencing our expression. That's what life ultimately is. So in order for you to manifest anything in life, you're really seeking to an experience with the thing you're thinking about. That's all you're really doing. But how you feel about it determines the outcome. And I think almost anybody knows this, but nobody thinks about it in the way I'm explaining it. But it's how it works for all of us. If you think you're going to have a good time tonight, chances are you're going to have a good time tonight. But if you got a bad feeling about something, you know what, I need to call so-and-so because something ain't right. We all have a sense for things. The difference is that most of the time we don't qualify things the way I'm explaining it now. These are just among many things that I just happen to pay attention to along the way. So,
wow. Hey, Cameron, thank you for your question, your comment, and sharing a little bit of your experience with your father. So Brother Monk, how has this information impacted your fatherhood experience?
Ooh. Well, once I got there, first of all, it took a while. I had a tough time coming up. I'm a 60s child out of New York, right? So you can imagine what that was like. You know, we moved from New York in the early 70s down to South Carolina in a rural town with 800 people in the whole town. You can imagine what that was like. So I had it really hard. I had a tough time. So it took me a long time to become the person that's talking right now. I wasn't this person when Imani, who's also on the line, when she was born. I wasn't the person I am right now. I was still in the process of becoming that person. But I had a hard time. You know, I had a abusive stepfather growing up. You know, I had the routine challenges a lot of young men and women have growing up, you know, in the 60s, early to mid 70s, you know. I had the same challenges, and those challenges affected me negatively. And I went through a lot. I went through homelessness for a few years, you know. So I've had some challenges I had to overcome, and which maybe we can talk about that part another time, because that's a really long story, that one. But I just knew that there had to be more to this experience that we call life, and I pursued it, and I'm glad I did. But it affected me in a way that I'm much more calm. I'm really, really calm, at peace almost all the time. I do have my challenges with my job, which you know about. So, you know, but that's work. That work is for everybody else. That work isn't just for me, you know. So that's with Power Corp, as you know. So, you know, that's how it's affected me. It's changed me. It's changed me in such a way that I'm always calm. I'm never worried about anything. I'm never disturbed or disrupted. I do have stresses from time to time, but my stress has more to do with tolerance. How long can I wait? You know, other than that, that's it. I don't really have any issues.
Okay. I have one question I want to ask, and I also wanted to give Mayan and Imani a question, opportunity to ask something. So if Mayan and Imani have a burning question, drop it now. If not, then I'll go to my last question, and then we're obviously going to have you back on the platform, brother. This is going to be, I mean, because we're learning and earning with you right now. So, Imani or Mayan, do you have a question?
Yeah. Yes, this is Imani. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Go ahead, Queen.
Yeah. So I actually want to circle back to when we spoke about higher self and lower self. And I know, Daddy, we speak a lot about how nothing is necessarily, you know, polarized in that way, you know, being higher or lower or good or bad. Right. So I just kind of want to bring it back to that and talk about that.
Okay, so she's referring to the Star of Ra. Most people refer to the Star of David, which is as above, so below. That's what that star references. So the lower self in reality is actually your ego. But even that part is divine. But your lower self is actually a combination of what you see in the mundane state. So mundane is when you see a bird, or you drink you drink some very tart drink. You know, maybe you drink lemonade and you go, ooh, that sour sudden taste you get. All these experiences from expressions and from influences, all these are upon your lower being, which is called by our ancestors, that's called Set. But that aspect actually refers to your ego. So that would be the unlearned aspect of your being would be considered the lower self, right? And that's the part that your higher self, your true self, which is the spirit part of your being, that part of the spirit energy that allows you to have consciousness and that allows you to perceive things for what they are, but only after the ego gets out of the way. This is the reason why a lot of times we do things and we make terrible mistakes first, only to find out later, oh man, you know what? Why did I do that? Man, I shouldn't have done that, you know? And all of a sudden you have this realization of and an understanding, but where the heck did that understanding come from? Because a lot of times you have this understanding, you didn't talk to nobody. It's something you discovered yourself after you did something, and maybe you had a negative experience from it. And then you go, man, I shouldn't have done that, man. And all of a sudden now you've got all this sense. Where was it before before you had this bad experience, or before you did whatever it is you did, you know? So once the ego subsides, which our ancestors referred to as Set, all right? So Set in the metaphor is the brother of Asa. So Asa is your actually upper self or divine self, and Set is actually the ego self, which is the lower self. And
isn't Set the
prototype? The arch nemesis of your higher self. It's the arch nemesis of your higher self. However, it will conform once it's educated. This is the reason why in the solar boat, Set is the one who protects the boat. Later on, after the trial and everything, he later protects the boat that Arthur is in. This is why he's on the boat in the first place.
Wait. So once again, for the uninitiated,
right?
If I hadn't studied or been exposed to this story, I wouldn't know what you're referencing right now. So I'm going to pull my question, and we're going to end with you giving a little more details for the uninitiated on this story of Set and Haru and the boat, and
that's a lot. That's pretty long. I'll be honest, it's long.
So we may have to save that to part 2. But I'm glad that you shared that, because I learned that Set was the expression that later became Satan.
You could say he is the Christian Satan, right? But in reality, he's your ego. He's the alter ego of Asa. He is the unlearned self. That's what Set is. So technically, a Setian is anyone who's unlearned.
Ooh, I had never seen A-U and then S-E-T and extrapolated S-E-T.
Right.
Ooh. Ashe. Wow. Well, go ahead and finish your point, and then we'll finish up, and then we're going to have to schedule a part 2. This has been enlightening. This has been enlightening.
Well, I'm glad I can help. I didn't learn all this stuff for nothing, but I did want to share all this stuff with my kids, and I do. I literally do. So sometimes we're sitting on the deck, whenever Imani comes over, and Cameron comes home because she's in college right now. So whenever we're all together, sometimes I'll when I'm relaxing, we're sitting on the deck listening to jazz, all of a sudden I'll just start talking sometimes, or Imani will ask a question and we'll just go on for a couple hours. But relating to the higher self, so Set is the ego, right? It's the unlearned self. It's called, technically, it used to be called Sebek back when the planet Mars was referred to as Sebku. So the ancient name for Mars was Sebku, right? So Sebku, if you look at, even in Zodiac today, if you look at Mars in the correct way, say, for example, you were to take the Greek gods, for example, Mars represents unruliness. It represents unruliness. So the planet Mars also represented Set. So it represents the attributes of yourself which are unruly. But at the same time, the attributes of yourself are unruly because it is undisciplined, because it doesn't know any better. So it seeks discovery. It wants to go and discover things. It wants to go out and find things. And it's also hard-headed, right? So it wants to go out and learn things for itself, even if it gets it killed, even if it gets a leg amputated, even if it winds up in a really, really bad situation. And we can think of millions of them, young and old, get themselves in situations that you would think, wow, I mean, you didn't have enough sense, to not do that, right? So this is what the Setian concept does. The unlearned self is the Setian, right? But after it commits, if you would, the divine crime against itself, then it's subdued by its own actions, and as a result of that, subdued, that allows your higher self, the Osirian aspect of your own being, to introduce wisdom into your being and teach your lower self. That's how that process actually works, and it takes time. As I tell my kids all the time, to get from this point, right, to get from this point to this point takes millions of years in consciousness. But you're probably like, well, how am I going to get millions of years while we sitting here talking over my lifetime? That's a whole nother conversation, my brother.
Well, yeah, I've kind of learned that we can't look at the middle of the movie and think that we've seen the whole movie. Right. So I say that. Hey, earners, whoo, man. I said earners. I was thinking of another group I'm in. Code keepers. we've been actually earning and learning from the good brother, the Khemetian monk. I love that. So, hey, on our way out, tell us what Khemetian monk talks about. I mean, what? How'd you come up with it? What's it mean? And then we're out of here.
Well, Khem, as you know, is the ancient name of where we come from. The land of the blacks was known as Kemet. They called it Khem, right? This was long before the Greeks called it Egyptos. And now today's translation is Egypt. But originally it was Egyptos. But before the Greeks called it Egyptos, it was called Kemet. So, as you know, what the reference to monk means, it means one who is devout. One who, well, first of all, one who loves, but more importantly, one who is devout. So, as for a monk, I'm devout, but I'm also black. So, Khemetian monk is one who is devout about his blackness or our blackness. And so I pursue that to share it with all of us.
Ashe. Well, once again, code keepers, you know, we've been learning and earning with the monk brother, the brother monk. Had to give him a nice, cute name, you know.
That's cool.
So we're going to have Brother Monk back on the show so we can continue learning about this philosophy and how we can apply it to our lives. I mean, there are a lot of things that we need to change. You know, we need to change these things. We need to make sure these things don't happen again. All right. You know, we need to make sure these things stop happening. We need to make sure that these things stop happening. It's definitely time for a change. And the interesting thing is, it looks like our ancestors have already left the way.
Yep.
The way is open. They've already left the way. We're going to have to turn over the tables. You just got to turn the tables over, right? The way has already been left. It's already been left. So learn the code, get on code, teach the code, and be the code. And we love you. All right? Peace.
Thank you. Peace.
Stay fly, 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 stay fly.
The views expressed by the guests are only the views of the guests, unless we say we agree. Unless explicitly stated.
Stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly.
Stay conscious. Stay fly.